Welcome to This Week in the PNFL. I'm your host, Mark Hill. And as always, we have Mitch Grawl and Dean Chambers. Happy holidays, gentlemen. Merry Christmas. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hello.
Doing great. I hope all you guys had a wonderful Christmas and everything is going well with you guys and being safe during this holiday season. So with those out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the games. We had some good games this week. We had an overtime game, and we had some teams that are probably going to start, probably lost some of their playoff chances, but we'll kick that around a little bit. So first game on the docket, we have Detroit going to play the Giants and walk out with a victory 41-18. We're going to start off with Dean.
Yeah, this is a game I believe I had said that I thought that the Giants would win but not cover the spread. But Detroit certainly had other plans in this game. And they did quite well, almost 400 yards of total offense, mostly passing. And, remember this team has a number of wide receivers that are fairly solid overall, but they're not necessarily very fast. But they're still very effective at catching passes. And, as you can see in this game, I don't know what happened with the Giants and whether they made in preparing for this game, made some assumptions or did some things that didn't turn out very well as far as the game planning process. But it was definitely not, whatever game plan they had in place was definitely not the one that was going to win against Detroit that week.
Agreed. Mitch?
Well, one of the issues that New York had is they had some of their receivers get banged up during this game. I know coming out of it, they've got a couple of receivers that are on the injury report this week. It shouldn't mean anything too serious to keep them out of this week's game, but I think that could have hampered them some. But, Detroit continues to play, that seven-man football where it's pretty much pass every down. And the New York Giants, it was the bad Giants this week. They weren't ready for it, and they got beat up pretty bad. So that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, they got roughed up a little bit on the edges there. So, next game, we have New Orleans hosting Green Bay, and they ended up holding off for a low-scoring game, 14-7. Mitch.
Well, Green Bay continues not to play very well. I think this is their third or fourth loss in a row. And pass defense continues to keep them in games, but offensively they are sputtering mightily right now. And so, it's a shame to see Dak Prescott, going through all that with this team. So that's all I'll say about that one.
Okay, Dean?
Well, as I look at the stats here, Prescott only threw the ball 11 times. Lawrence came in, there must have been an injury, and only threw the ball 8 times. There's only a total of 19 passes for a team that's generally good at passing. So you might think, did they run the ball out? Well, they had 39 yards of rushing. So it's like they didn't do very well at either one. I mean, their offense just didn't do very well, period. And although their defense only gives up 14 points to the Saints, your offense has to show up if you're going to win a game where your team only gives up 14 points, which is good defensive performance. Offense has to show up, and clearly for Green Bay, the offense didn't show up.
But you might have to ask, how in the world New Orleans only had 14 points when they ran 75 plays to Green Bay's 39 too. So
Equally valid question. I mean, this game is kind of confounding, I guess, in both counts.
Okay, agree. Next game we have on the list, we have San Francisco hosting Indianapolis, and Indianapolis losing. I don't know if it was that they didn't show or just a bad performance, but they ended up losing that game 34-10. Dean.
Well, this game is a mystery too because Indianapolis 10 points. They went 9-17 on third down conversions. They had a total offense of 360 yards, 87 yards of rushing, not bad. 273 yards of passing. How does all that offensive output only convert to 10 points?
3 interceptions.
Yeah,
That'll
exactly.
kill you.
That will do it. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say this too for Indianapolis. One, you're still starting the right quarterback. All right, so thank you for that. But you got to get that running back who's running with steel-toed boots out of the game. You've got a running back still active that is been doubtful and questionable, and that makes them run like they're in molasses when they're on the field. So that could be causing some issues out there in some of these routes and some of these blocking schemes. So that'd be my only advice for Indianapolis this week.
Okay, so you gave well, I guess you gave your analysis and your coverage of the game. So I think we can go ahead and move on. The next one that we have is Jacksonville playing against New England. We all predicted that that New England was going to show up. Didn't quite happen the way that we planned it, and Jacksonville walked away with the victory, 38-24. Mitch.
Well, I keep thinking, you know what? I think that these Patriots are, they get some help here. There, they could be legitimate playoff contenders. And then they go and lose to Jacksonville. So we can, I guess, put that to bed for now. But hey, it happens. So Captain Kirk was definitely able to light up the scoreboard with 415 yards. So we'll see if New England can bounce back and stay in the hunt since I think New England and a couple other teams are still mathematically in this thing. So we'll see what happens.
Dean.
Yeah, I think you have to wonder with Jacksonville's offense if they had committed to either sticking with Captain Kirk through the whole season rather than having this kind of shuffling of quarterbacks in and out, or if they had gone with possibly Mason Rudolph at the beginning of the season, stuck with them the full season. If Jacksonville's offense might have been more effective from week to week, and maybe Jacksonville might have a chance at, having a winning record this season, because you can look at this game and, what Jacksonville did on offense clearly was effective.
Clearly. So would you guys happen to say, would you say that what is it that New England is? We go back to them for a second. What is it that you think New England is missing at this point? Is it the players? Is it the play calling? Are it the plays? What do you think overall is their biggest missing item? Each one of you take a turn at this.
Well, as I look at this, or this particular game, probably a little bit too conservative on the offensive side, being that on 18 completions they only gained 193 yards passing, and so I'd say maybe they're passing the pass plays might have been a little bit too conservative on that end, but that's just my thought.
Okay, Dean.
Well, regarding the passing, the only 44% completions, which is not very good. The running actually looks fairly effective. I mean, you look at the three running backs, Mixon averaged 8.3 yards per carry, Chubb 5.0, Singletary 6.5. The running game total was 5.6 yards per carry for the team it'd be easy to say that maybe if they'd run the ball a bit more than they did, they might have been more effective. But either way, your quarterback has to complete more than 44% of his passes.
And I
Agree.
have a feeling they were anticipating more of a balanced attack from Jacksonville, and they got an air raid, super pass heavy from them. So that probably threw off their defense a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Next game, low scoring affair. Thought I was going to be able to pull it off. Seattle went to Minnesota. It was projected Seattle was going to win. Again, low scoring game, and Minnesota ended up taking this one 13-6. Mitch.
Well, you know what? You found some defense. I know you've been looking for that defense, for several weeks. I think now a couple of weeks in a row that the defense has shown up for you. So that's a good thing. On the flip side, the offense is in the Bermuda Triangle after this past week there. So tough, hard game. I always say I don't care what Minnesota's record is. Minnesota's always tough. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I always find them to be tough, a tough team to play against. And, they might not always win them, but they sure as heck make you earn it. And this past week, you know what? They were able to get a few extra inches than Seattle.
I agree. Dean.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, I think I went to drink some milk, and on the side of the milk carton, there were two missing. The Atlanta offense and the Seattle offense were both missing this past week. And I think we just both need to
I agree. I agree.
focus on what we can do to make our offense more effective, because there have been some times during the season, I think you would agree with me, that for both of us, the offense hasn't really shown up the way it needs to.
Exactly, and that puts a lot of pressure on the defense, and you can
And your
never.
defense did its job. It gave up 13 points.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's reasonable to say that in any given week, if your defense gives up 13 points, it's reasonable to expect that your offense will score enough points to beat that.
I agree. And when I had a team that was putting up, over 20 points a game, it's like, yeah, that would be perfect. But yeah, this time they just offense did not show up at all.
Yeah. I would have to say maybe look at the types of plays that are in that game plan. Only average 3.2 yards per pass. Might have been a little bit too conservative on the pass plays, but that Viking defense is always tough, though. Always tough.
Yep, got to stretch it out a little bit. Okay, next game on the list: Anaheim taking on Denver, and Denver's sputtering it as they go along. They ended up losing this game 24-16. Dean.
Yeah, I think Denver gave up 24 points. It's not a huge amount, but you generally want your defense to be a little better than that. And as far as the offense, again, the three interceptions are the story here, because they completed 63% of the third downs. One of the big things I think we look at as offensive coaches, are we effective at converting third downs that keeps drives alive? That's huge. They went 1 for 1 on fourth down efficiency. But those three interceptions definitely lost this game. And I know some weeks when I've been working game planning, I'll send games with what I think is my final game plan. And one of those columns, I'll look at how many sacks am I taking? How many interceptions am I taking? Are there certain plays that I can take out of the game plan and replace with something else that will get sacked fewer times, get intercepted fewer times? And sometimes you need to do that. And I think, I don't know if the Denver coach has been, I'm not saying he's not doing that. Maybe he is, but there's something to keep in mind when we're seeing that we lose with three interceptions this game, like the other one we talked about a few minutes ago.
Yep. Mitch.
It almost looks like mirror images of each other, except that Denver threw 3 picks, right? I mean, the number of plays, the number of running plays by each team, passing, all about the same. And so, yeah, you're 0 for 3 in the turnover battle. It, you know, it, hey, the fact it was a one-score game is actually pretty, you know, pretty, pretty surprising.
Yeah, I guess you could say that Joshua Dobbs was effective to throwing to Anaheim players, and Trubisky was effective at doing that too.
Yeah,
Different
that's
color
right.
jerseys.
Yeah.
Okay, next game, as we are rounding this out, our final 3 games of week 13, we're going to jump over to Atlanta going into Chicago. And Chicago ended up taking this one very, very close, but they ended up taking this one 24-13. We're going to start off with Mitch, and then we're going to go to the coach of the game of Atlanta. So we're going to start with you, Mitch.
Yeah, hey, the thing that I wonder about, Dean, you talked about the offense a little earlier. If I remember right, the previous week, Shy Smith had a huge game with Justin Fields in your big win, and this week Shy got hurt. I mean, he's actually probable for this upcoming week's game, and so. I wonder how much of that might have impacted some of those pass plays for you there against that tough Chicago defense. But I'll tell you this: Chicago now. I was just happy to see that they were able to get out of the game without having to put a quarterback on a stretcher. So Mason Rudolph did survive the game. They had a pretty good game at that. So. We'll give hats off to Coach Tucker on getting his third starter, I think, in 3 weeks, or third starter in 4 weeks, or something like that, or fourth starter in 5 weeks. I don't know. Every week there's a new quarterback for Chicago right now, and he still was able to make some offense. So we'll leave it at that.
All right, and for the coach himself, Dean, what happened with your team this week?
I guess the short version, the Reader's Digest version of the story is to say that the offense didn't produce. Scored 13 points. Again, the defense gave up 24. Not a huge amount. You'd like your defense to do a little better, but, you should still have a chance of winning a game. But I think the big thing that the Chicago defense did when you look at the stat line, they held Barry J. Sanders to 10 carries at 28 yards. That's 2.8 yards per carry. And none of the teams in our league are going to win when their running back is getting 2.8 yards per carry. That's going to force your offense into passing more and going for big plays. And likewise, if the defense is very good at containing those as well, then that's pretty hard to move the ball and sustain some scoring in offense when 2 of the things that your offense generally does don't work very well.
I agree. I know firsthand. Okay. Next game that we have on the list is the New York Jets. And I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say about this, because New York Jets went to go play LA and they ended up losing that one in LA 24-20. Dean.
Well, both of these teams battled back and forth and scored and answered scores. And, with the game almost over, the score was standing as it does. And there was one play, which I'm going to focus on here. And there was 26 seconds left. And the Jets called a pass along right play, which had a chance. And Derek Carr threw the ball, and the receiver was right about the 1 or 2 yard line, and the ball was just slightly overthrown. It looked like a ball the receiver maybe could dive for it and catch the ball, but it looked like the pass was just slightly out of reach of that receiver. Now, that was a wide receiver 7 who was the intended receiver on that play. And I looked at the roster, looked at that wide receiver 7. He's not bad, but he's definitely not like wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 quality. He has 83 speed, 83 acceleration, not bad. But I think that's even enough difference that if he was like an 84, 85 guy, he might have been able to run just fast enough to be under that pass and catch it. And if he catches that pass, Jets win this game, 27-24. So a wide receiver 7 can make a difference. I would even be willing to say that if my wide receiver 7 was in that play, who is 84, by the way, he might have caught that pass. And that wins the game. Now, you could argue that you should be leading in the score and shouldn't need this. I guess you call that a Hail Mary play, but you can also say a little bit better wide receiver in that spot catches that pass, Jets win.
Yeah, Mitch, I want to hear what Mitch has to say first. Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, first of all, I would never have a wide receiver 7 on my roster, so I don't even know I don't know what kind of impact that would have. But I would say this: the best thing that happened to LA was Lamar Jackson getting hurt, and I think Lamar Jackson is doubtful for the next 4 weeks, which is going to force LA to play Deshaun Kaiser, who is the quarterback that led them to the AFC Championship last year. And when you look at the stats from this game, Jackson was getting absolutely trampled by the New York defense, and then Kaiser comes in and saves the day along, for the Chargers. So I think that the quarterback questions that have been kind of bouncing around LA all year long through attrition are being answered. So we'll see how this plays out these next few weeks, but it definitely tightens the race up in the West for sure.
And by the way, your wide receiver 6, Mitch, would have caught that pass.
Of course he would, because he's a 6, not a 7.
But that's who would have been in position to make that play if it was your team, though, because you don't have a wide receiver 7.
No, I do not.
To be fair, your wide receiver 5 would have been probably a yard or two even shorter and missing that play. But
we'll see.
Okay. Last game for this week was a really good game. It went into overtime. Oakland going into Washington and came up just a bit short with Washington taking that game 40-34. We're going to start off with Dean, and then we're going to pass it over to the coach. Dean.
Yeah, this was definitely a shootout, and high scoring. Obviously, it's 34 at the end of regulation and went into overtime. When I look at this, the Redskins had a total of 490 yards offense. They went 75% on third down efficiency, but their defense gave up almost as much to the Raiders, which is why they went into overtime. And that's ultimately what decided it.
Now, I also noticed too that they didn't, Washington put up 126 yards on the ground to Oakland's 58. So my question to the coach is, Mayfield put up some good yards in the air, but what about your ground game, Mitch?
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, luckily, the offensive coordinator called some extra passes, because at 2.9 yards a rush, if I'd have ran it more than that, I never would have gotten a first down. So it's probably a good thing he called a few extra passing plays. But I'll tell you what, well, bottom line, what this came down to is that Washington had a couple of fumbles that I was able to recover and take advantage of on some short fields. I think one I actually recovered on the 1-yard line or in the end zone. I can't remember at this point. After punting, doing a coffin corner punt deep. And so I'm sure everybody, when they were placing their bets this week and looked at that, looked at the spread, said, well, I think I'll take the over on the over-under with these two teams playing, because, we're known for our offensive output. So I'm just glad we gave you all a show, and, congratulations to my NFC nemesis there, old Coach Seymour. So.
Okay, then, gentlemen. So, as we wrap that segment up, we're going to move on over to our next portion of the show. And this was something that was, as usual, we kind of hammered out during the pre show. And this topic was dealing with the last three drafts as far as the quarterbacks and how the quarterbacks fit into, I guess, how they interacted within the league. Is it valid to draft a quarterback early, or should they just go ahead with something a little bit later? We're going to start this one off with Dean. This is one of the topics that he came up with, and we want to kind of get his take on it, and then we're going to bounce it over to Mitch as well. So we're going to go ahead and get you started off with the quarterbacks in the past three drafts and how they're faring so far in this league. Go ahead and take it away, Dean.
Okay, yeah, just to quickly do the rundown. In the 2039 draft, Justin Fields was picked third overall. Zach Wilson was picked by Seattle fifth overall. And then there were six other quarterbacks in the draft. They were all undrafted as free agents. Five of them are still sitting in the free agent pool. And Kyle Trask is a QB3 on the 49ers, was signed at some point as a free agent. Now, I think the reason why those two quarterbacks went as high is because, one, when you look at all eight of them, you basically see two future starters and the rest are career backups at best, if that. In both Atlanta and Seattle, well, it was Kansas City back then, but nonetheless, both of our teams needed a quarterback. And I think when we looked at the pool, we saw that there were really only two viable options available. So we had to draft one of those early on, or we were afraid they would be gone. So I think that's why they were drafted so early on. You look at the 2040, there were also 8 quarterbacks, and I don't think the teams drafting there were really in as much need as we were a year earlier. So Trevor Lawrence was drafted as the future starter in Green Bay. Trey Lance went to Chicago as a possible future starter. Trevor Lawrence was the 4th pick overall. 3 rounds later, Trey Lance gets drafted by Chicago at the 4th pick in round 4. Someone named Kellen Mond, M-O-N-D, was drafted by Jacksonville. That quarterback is not even in our files anymore with the 9th pick in the 4th round. Now, the 16th pick in round 5 was interesting. The Jets drafted Mac Jones, and then he ended up getting boosted. I mean, he was maybe starter, maybe backup material before the boost. The boost definitely made him a future starter. He may well be the starting quarterback after Derek Carr in New York. He's still with the Jets. And then with the 10th pick in round 6, someone named Jamie Newman was drafted by Minnesota and is still in Minnesota as a backup. And there were 3 undrafted free agents. So there were definitely more of those quarterbacks ended up on rosters in 2040 in a year in which probably none of the teams really had absolute need to, want to necessarily draft a quarterback early on. You look at 2041, the last draft we had, you had the 3rd pick in round 1 going to Malik Lewis, who went to Anaheim. He could be a future starter after Joshua Dobbs. Desmond Ridder was drafted by Detroit. I suspect that's probably who James was thinking about starting at the 4th pick of round 4. 1 pick later, Holton Ahlers, I think his name is pronounced, drafted also by Detroit, is currently their 3rd string quarterback. And then the guy they're starting, Eric Barrier, I think is how his name is pronounced. He was drafted in the 7th pick in round 4. Once again, this was a player that was boosted. The 49ers drafted him. I'd imagine Charlie probably thought that was a good value in the 4th round to draft him. But then he became even more valuable, substantially so, with the boost, and then he traded him to Detroit. In the 17th pick of round 5, Indianapolis drafted Matt Corral, and that's currently his 3rd string quarterback. Brock Purdy was an undrafted free agent. He's in Denver as a 3rd string quarterback. So most of the quarterbacks in that draft are currently on teams as either backups or future starters. I don't think any of those are starting yet because, again, none of those teams probably were drafting out of immediate need other than Detroit. But, Detroit is kind of in rebuilding mode. I think James would have drafted and started whoever he could, even if he hadn't made that trade for the boosted quarterback. So one of those guys would have been a starter anyway. So
Okay.
just interesting to look at how those three drafts went at that position and where those players currently are.
Definitely, as I'm looking at the list here, and we'll have that posted up as well. Mitch, what is your opinion on what Dean has said so far, and do you see it the same way or something different?
Well, it's definitely interesting. Definitely interesting. As I look at this, and I know we talked about this in our pre-show, honestly, it just really depends on where you're drafting, what your situation is, and what else is available around the league. Because when you look at the different ratings, right, of our quarterbacks, and we have 18 teams, right, in our league. And if you look at based on how I have quarterbacks rated in this league, based on the weightings I use for different ratings, etc. If I look at what I consider the top 18 quarterbacks, which by the way, not every team has someone starting in the top, 18, by the way. But if I just look at this top 18 quarterbacks in the league, the number 18 quarterback based on actual current ratings compared to the number one quarterback based on actual current ratings is 99.5% of that number one quarterbacks total. And so we are talking razor thin margins between the number one quarterback in the league, supposedly, and the number 18 quarterback in the league. And so usually there are free agents that you can get that already have a few years of development, or there might be a quarterback on a roster already that's maybe a QB2, a QB3 that already has a couple of years of development, that it might make sense instead of drafting a quarterback early and having to wait to develop them. Maybe it's worth packaging that pick for one of those backups somewhere else because there's not going to be that much difference, in the long term. But in the short term, you could get like a little bit of basically get a few years jump on the development side for that quarterback. Plus, maybe pick up some other picks or some other players in that piece of it. Sometimes there might be just another free agent that, based on actuals, is rated higher, and you can pick them up and then maybe draft that quarterback in round 3. And, you have someone that can play immediately, then have that other quarterback coming. When I look at quarterbacks based on their actual ratings, now not their potential and all that kind of stuff, but based on their actual ratings, productive ratings that's making an impact right now, for quarterbacks that have 5 years or less experience in this league, I'm looking, and other than Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones, and Justin Fields, I don't know if I would have drafted any of those, or would have recommended drafting any of those, before anybody else other than those players within the first 2 to 3 rounds. Those are the only players right now that when you look at their potentials, would make are either going to be in the top 10 based on quarterbacks that were drafted, other than the ones who got boosts. And I'm taking away, because when we drafted, we didn't know they're going to get boosted. Okay, but taking away the ones that got boosted, those 3 are the only ones that I would have even remotely thought about drafting in the first couple of rounds, just based on where we're at. So I think things are definitely going to continue to change here as we continue to separate out the ratings with our players in the draft, and that's going to make it more interesting, because I think we're going to have fewer and fewer quarterbacks that look like they should be starters or should be drafted early, because we're going to have so many veterans that are maxed out, versus some of these rookies that we'll now have coming on board. But we're going to have to start comparing our drafts now to, okay, if I'm looking at quarterbacks to draft, am I comparing them against the whole league, or am I comparing them to the quarterbacks that have been drafted within the last 4 seasons? Because those are the quarterbacks that they're going to be competing against over the next 10 seasons, and the ones whose ratings have been, fluctuated more versus these players that have been around 5+ years. So that's my take, my thoughts. I think we could debate going back and forth all night on this thing, but at the end of the day, it just depends on where you're at, what's available, and
I just want to add one quick comment to that. As we go forward and we see each draft class has fewer quarterbacks that are worthy of being drafted earlier, the smaller quantity of those kinds of quarterbacks being available, I think the ones that do get picked early, the way Justin Fields and Zach Wilson were, I think it will look better long term to look back and say, oh, this guy was drafted 3rd overall. It will look like it was more worth making that pick at 3rd overall than it might have in the past as well, because we have fewer quarterbacks that are worthy of that kind of early pick, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. Would you agree with that, Mitch?
Yeah, to an extent. I just look out there like right now, and if I just look at quarterbacks in the league with 5 years or less experience,
right,
and I look at I say, I'm going to look at their potential ratings, and based on my weightings for potential ratings, like Zach Wilson, and again, this is just for quarterbacks with 5 years or less experience. Zach Wilson would be the 7th highest rated quarterback of players that are 5 years less experience. Does that deem him a top 5 pick? Probably not. But also, two of those 7 are players that got boosted, so you would not have known. So taking those out, Zach Wilson is a top 5 quarterback with players who have 5 years or less experience. So maybe, but I think there's a stretch in that piece of it. So again, it just depends on the situation and what you truly look at. If you need a quarterback now, yeah, you ain't drafting a quarterback early right now. If you need a quarterback down the road and you've got one that's got high potentials, and you want to go ahead and spend the pick because you've got a 13-year quarterback, go ahead, pull the trigger and go with it. But you're not going to get anybody right now that is better than just about any of the free agents if you're looking for a quarterback to play right now. So,
but the bottom line is, when Mark made the choice, his options were, having decided there wasn't anything that he thought was acceptable available in the free agent pool, his options were to draft Zach Wilson. The next quarterback was Kyle Trask, who's a backup in San Francisco. You look at their ratings, you definitely see Zach Wilson was by far the better choice. So although everything you say is true, given what his options were on the draft board at that point, Zach Wilson was definitely by far the best quarterback available at the 5th pick overall in that draft.
Yeah. Yes, he was.
Or you trade out the pick and draft something else. Just because he's the only one available, the best one available, doesn't mean that he's worth the pick. So.
Yeah, this is true.
Again,
but
we can debate all night.
Oh yeah, there's all different ways you can kind of take it and toss it and spin it and everything else. But for me, that was the best pick. That was the best option for me because the quarterbacks at that time did not come up to the standards of what I needed at the time, and I was just still figuring things out. And I know that people were trying to throw trades at me, and I'm like, you know what? Let me just start from the beginning and just go from there and pick my back up. But one thing that Dean had mentioned as far as picking someone further down the line, or Mitch was figuring something further down the line, that could be someone you can use as a project and then just slowly bring them along and build them up while you have a more veteran in there to keep your team afloat till you get his numbers up and run, even though his numbers may not have him as a starter right away, but after a couple seasons, he can be a starter.
But if you look at those 5 undrafted free agents from that quarterback class, they weren't projects. They weren't future starters. They were career backups at best. So, yeah, he could have traded the pick down and drafted something else, but then he still needs a quarterback. He still needs to find some somewhere because other than Zach Wilson at that point, it wasn't in the draft.
True.
Maybe there was a free agent. Maybe he could have signed Mason Rudolph. Maybe he could have signed someone else. But, as far as getting a quarterback in the draft, that was really the only ticket that was left.
Right. Okay.
But just because it's the only ticket doesn't mean you have to buy it.
Yeah, true.
Have to buy.
At the end of the day, is what you think is best for your teams going forward, be it right or be it wrong by other opinions.
And if I was the Seattle general manager, I would go out right now and pick up free agent Jordan Tamu as my backup, because Jordan Tamu is far better than the 2 backups that are already on that roster, and the ratings are very close to what Zach Wilson's are, which means you wouldn't have to change up the game plan if something were to happen to Zach Wilson. But hey, that's just me.
As he subtly slides his opinions in there, and so I'll have to give him a little kickback later on off of that one. All right, so we're gonna wrap up that middle segment. We're cooking right along here. Thank you, gentlemen. More info for the coaches out there. And next one we're coming up to are the Week 14 picks, because we have Week 14, 15, 16, and that's it. So first one on the list, we have the Redskins hosting the Lions. They are giving the Lions 10.5 points. We're going to start with Dean on this one.
Okay, hold on. We got to bring up my stuff. I think it'd be easy to say that the Redskins are going to win this game, but I think what we will see is that I think the Lions will be competitive. I think the Redskins will probably win, but I don't expect them to cover the spread.
Okay, Mitch.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think the Lions will definitely move the ball around and keep it somewhat close, but Redskins will win.
Okay. Next game, we have the Falcons going up against the Giants. They are giving the Falcons 6.5 points. We're going to start with you, Dean. Oh, sorry. No, pause that. We're starting with Mitch. We want to hear the coach second, so we're going to start with Mitch.
I'm anticipating some weather in this game, being that's going to be in New York in December. And so I am going to go with the Falcons to win, but I think it's going to be closer than 6.5 points.
Okay. Coach, what's your team going to do?
If the Redskins can win and cover in the rain, the Falcons can do it too. And we're not necessarily assuming it may rain, it may not. But I'm confident that my team will get the job done.
All right. Next game, we have the Cardinals going against the 49ers. They are giving the Cardinals 9.5. Dean?
Yeah, I think Chicago is going to win this game. Is going to win it pretty solid. And I think this might be the week we see that maybe San Francisco is not going to make postseason. The Cardinals are going to win and cover.
Mitch?
I think the 49ers are going to keep it close, but Chicago wins.
Okay. Next one, Packers going into Anaheim to take on the Rams. They are giving the Rams 4.5. Mitch?
Well, the one thing that will keep the Packers into this game is the fact that their pass defense continues to be pretty good, and the Rams are definitely a passing team. That said, I think the Rams are definitely going to win this, and I think they'll cover the 4.5. I think they'll win by a touchdown, but it could be something like last week's New Orleans game, 14-7. But I think Rams win it, and they'll cover the 4.5.
Dean?
Yeah, I think the Packers right now are like are like an electric vehicle that's a little bit out of range and doesn't have enough range and miles left to get to a charging station recharge. The Packers had just run out of energy. I think the Rams will win and cover.
Okay. Saints going up against the Broncos. They are giving the Saints 7.5. Dean.
I think I'd like to say that the Broncos could compete in this game, but if they continue to give up, turn the ball over as much as they have, and I think the Saints have very much incentive to want to win, to possibly, even though they may not win the division, certainly make it to postseason as a wild card. Saints will win and cover.
Mitch.
Saints win, but they will not cover. I don't trust that they'll be able to score enough to cover 7.5. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Next game we have the Jets taking on the Colts. They are giving the Jets 13.5. I don't think those numbers are right based on how they've been playing this season, but you guys let me know. Let's start with Mitch.
Well, like I said, the Colts have to get that the zombie out of their halfback three on their roster. Otherwise it's going to be another week of quicksand running routes out of the backfield and on blocking and on special teams. So if they can do that, I think they can keep this game within 20.
Okay. Dean?
I think the Colts offense stays in zombie mode. The Jets are going to, despite that spread, the Jets are going to win and cover. This is the time of the season where Thomas is building toward the playoffs, and Jets are going to win a solid win here and cover the spread.
Okay. Next one, Vikings going into Vegas to take on the Raiders. They're giving the Raiders 8.5. Dean.
I think the Vikings will be a bit pesky here and score some points and challenge a very solid a very solid defense that the Raiders play. But I think the Raiders will get it together on offense. And, they certainly showed they could score some points against the Redskins last week. This is my lead pipe lock of the week. Raiders win and cover.
Okay. Coach, what do you have for your team this week?
Well, you know how it is with Oakland. I mean, we don't even know if we deserve to take the same field with the Vikings. The way we play them, and we're just lucky to be able to have a chance to still be in this division race. And we look forward to play the Vikings, and and taking our vitamins. And the good Lord willing, we'll play a good game this week, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Who would know Lou Holtz is alive and has come back as a coach in the PNFL?
Yeah, sandbagging over there. And I mistakenly said you guys are in Vegas. You guys are still in Oaktown. So, next game, we have a pick'em game. The Seahawks are going to New England to take on the Patriots. So, it's a coin flip on this one. So, we're going to start with Mitch. What do you got?
Well, since it's the pick'em game, you know what that means. I need some cool intro music here. It's my lead pipe lock for the week.
All right, we'll have to get that for you.
As we have seen, both of these teams came off very, very disappointing losses last week, both in very much different fashions. Both very much need a win to have any semblance of a heartbeat for the playoffs right now. And, it's going to be in New England, probably some weather, being it's going to be outdoors in December. Seattle's that dome team. But you know what? I think that the Seattle coaching staff's going to have a little extra time this week. And I think they're going to put a few wrinkles in on that offensive side. And I think they're going to pull it out. I think we're going to go with the Seahawks to go New England and win this game. Lead pipe lock it. Go ahead, get the third mortgage, pay off all your Christmas presents. It's a done deal.
Okay. No pressure there. Dean.
Yeah, I can't add a whole lot to that other than to say that I think a lot of conventional wisdom will be thrown out regarding the weather and some of the things that Mitch mentioned. And I think this it's calling an intuitive factor, but something tells me that Seattle is going to be more prepared and will win this game.
Yes, we will. Most definitely. Yes, we will. Last game, we have the Chargers going up against the Jaguars. They are giving the Chargers 10.5. So as we wrap this up, we are going to start with Dean.
I think even if Jacksonville starts Captain Kirk at quarterback, I think the Chargers defense is going to be too tough to allow the Jacksonville offense to do what they did last week. So I think the Chargers, who are also going to be very effective at offense, again, as Mitch noted earlier, going back to the quarterback that led them to the division championship last season, Chargers are going to win, and yes, they're even going to cover.
Okay. Mitch.
I mean, what can you say? I mean, I think the Chargers. I mean, they're arguably the best team in the PNFL. I mean, you can't look at what their records have been against some of these top teams. You think about last year, division champs. They're back. They're tied for first again this year. Their starting quarterback gets hurt, and they still find a way to beat the Jets last week. I mean, of course they're going to win and cover. They might just win the Super Bowl. I don't even know what might happen with these guys.
Oh, yeah, we know he's hyping him up. Putting that locker room material on there in Jacksonville. Definitely see that. So, as we are coming to wrap this up, gentlemen, as we head into this, want to wish you guys a happy new year. And hopefully you guys are being safe and being careful out there during the holiday season. Dean, you want to finish something or anything you want to say, and then we'll have Mitch wrap it up?
Well, I would just say that by the time we convene next week, we will be in next year.
Most definitely. Mitch.
Well, I think there's only one thing left to do. Let's get it.